Hello, everybody. This is Harry Caruso, founder of Caruso Co, the nation's leading aftermarket automotive investment banking firm. And we are launching our podcast series, which we are incredibly excited about, and especially for the guest that we have this week, who is Jimmy Williams from Sonny's Car Wash Equipment, who is specifically focused on car washing as it applies to automotive dealerships. Jimmy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Good to be here, Harry. Thanks for inviting me.
I'm very excited, and there's a lot to discuss. So, I guess to kick things off, Jimmy, would you mind giving the listeners and viewers a quick background on yourself and sort of your area of focus over at Sonny's?
Yeah. So my background really goes back a little over 30 years that I've been focused on the automotive side of the business in car dealers, particularly as it relates to fixed operations. Most of my experience has been as a factory rep on the equipment side for dealerships that are making capital equipment investment, wheel services, full shops. So most of my career I've spent working with dealerships that were building new facilities or expanding their existing service facilities. So so all of that has been built around customer service on their end as it relates to equipment. But like I say, factory rep for many, many years, built automotive shops and service facilities. And about 15 years ago, car washes became a key part of what I was doing. So constantly in every facility that we built, we had to factor in the car wash. And so what became interesting, where the car wash was just a little tunnel on the side of the building or the back of the building, and it was just kind of one component. Over the years, it grew to be a more important part of the process. Number one is because the throughput of these dealerships, the OEM participation, manufacturer expectations, all those things which we'll talk about, really drove the importance of the car wash. And so it has become an important part. The interesting thing about that is the car wash equipment manufacturing didn't change a lot as far as the dealership world. In the retail world, the car wash equipment manufacturing changed dramatically. But the dealership world, it was pretty much the same old, small space, 15 feet wide, 50 feet long, rollover, quick wash, and that was it. So the evolution of the car wash industry didn't change a lot. But my experience was the car wash industry was so much more, and I had dealers that were asking me for more out of their car wash. And over the years, it just, as I began to push different manufacturers, hey, can we do this or that? I didn't see a lot of appetite there. So in 2021, I joined Sonny's, and Sonny's was reached out to as Sonny's was doing some acquisitions, was invited to join Sonny's, and I had been really obviously interested on the retail side of the car wash because my whole background is on fleets, facilities, dealerships, and so forth on the car wash side. And so really I jumped all in on the retail part and love the retail part. Was a lot of fun, big beautiful car washes, growing rapidly and all that. But I began to have dealers that reached out to me that I'd served on the dealership side in car washes. And I'll be real honest, I kind of declined their invitation to pursue their car wash business because I really had left that behind, that it really wasn't uh, a market that I was really focused on because they were buying the same old car wash for 15 or 20 years. There was nothing new, nothing really exciting about it. But what I found was their appetite had changed. The dealerships were coming to me and said, no, we want a better car wash. We want a better car wash experience. And so as I began to expose, those ideas that, okay, the how what do you mean by a better car wash experience? Do you mean conveyorized car wash? Do you mean a little more revenue oriented car wash? Those car wash. But I found they just wanted a better car wash, that their experiences was they needed to deliver a better car wash. In other words, the customer expectation had elevated. And that's what really changed the game is customers now knew the difference in what was 10, 15 years ago. They could pull in and got their car washed. Everybody's like, oh, thanks for washing my car. Now, if they wash their car and it's not really clean, they're going to notice because they know what to expect. The express retail car wash market has changed the fact that so many people now understand that, you know, they can get a car wash somewhere else pretty quick, pretty easy, pretty clean. So if the dealer's going to do it, they ought to do it right. That's kind of what the consumer changed their attitude. So anyway, so the appetite changed is the best way I can put it. Dealership suddenly wanted a better car wash experience. So
Well, they needed to, right? To your
yeah,
earlier point, the undeniable beneficiary of the recent boom in car wash activity over the past 6 years now has been the consumer. The consumer
yes,
is now exposed to a far higher quality wash than ever before.
yeah, yeah.
To your point, Jimmy, the expectations have gone up a lot. What I think might be most interesting, and goodness knows there's quite a lot to cover on the topic, but if for any dealers listening, Jimmy, where does the rubber meet the road, if you will, in terms of why bother? Is it profit? Is it revenue and sales volume that you're moving? What's the benefit to the dealership?
Well, so that's an interesting question. Again, over the years, when I would do a car wash for a facility, and let's just use it anything that's a six-figure piece of equipment, whether it's 100,000 or $150,000, there was always the pain point for a dealership is that they didn't make any revenue off of it. In other words,
Right.
dealers didn't want to spend any more money on a piece of equipment that they couldn't charge for. So, in other words, let's just buy the cheapest one we can get. As long as we have a component, a piece, a car wash, then we're good. So let's not spend any more money than we have to. The interesting thing is I would have dealers at the same time that would say to me, well, we spend so much money on this car wash, man, the dealer really wishes he could make some money on it. And my statement always was, well, the problem is you're not really set up to make money. Now, again, my background, when on the dealership side, really were not, I was not on the retail side of the car wash business, but I understood where that leap needed to be from a traditional courtesy car wash, whether it's a rollover or drive through or a conveyorized car wash at a dealership. Most of them were not set up to really create any kind of revenue. Number one is because of staging, and where do they stage the cars and how does that process go? And so what happened is dealers always kind of regretted the fact that they couldn't charge for the most expensive piece of equipment in their facility, maybe, but they also weren't really looking at the result from a customer experience standpoint. So it's more of they did it more for the benefit of the manufacturer because the manufacturer would send out a survey, was your car, it wouldn't always say was your car washed, but it was imply was your car clean or whatever. And they just didn't want a negative survey. So the drive was more so, let's just do a car wash so that they can't fill out a negative survey. They weren't really concerned about how clean they got the car. It was just the fact that they washed the car. So what changed was when they began to ask about revenue is also when the manufacturers begin to elevate what their expectations were for the customer experience, what that customer experience on the drive. So where we are today, I have those conversations all the time about revenue because Sonny's is obviously we build more conveyorized car washes than anybody in the world. So we know the revenue piece. If you want revenue, we have the pay stations, we have the processes, we have the procedures. But the question is, do you really want revenue? And what I found was dealers really weren't interested in $20 car washes. That's not why they got in the car wash business. They were in the car wash business to take care of customers that were buying new cars that were returning for service. In other words, that whole customers for life that a few famous dealers have kind of used that terminology. But the idea is that the car wash was meant to be a way to assure that customer would come back for the next service. That customer would feel that they got a higher level of service than just an independent shop or an oil change facility. So once dealers begin to realize the value of the car wash, they quit asking me about revenue so much as how they look at return on investment. So the return on investment is an entirely different thing than revenue.
So, Jimmy, is it fair to say that 5 years ago, car washes in the purview of auto dealerships were viewed nothing but obligatory at best? And now in
Yeah,
today's world, they are actually viewed as a retention mechanism.
that's correct. That's correct. Yeah, it's a again, it doesn't change the fact that most car dealers are not car wash people. So meaning that they're in the car business, they're in the business of selling and servicing cars. And so what's really changed though is car washing has kind of become part of the service experience. It's kind of an assumed when you buy a brand new automobile and you go and you sign the paper in F&I and you're in the F&I office and you buy that car, when you walk out, your car is as clean as it's ever going to be. The make ready detail guy has gone over every detail of that car so that when it's in the delivery area at the dealership, you know, I've received that car in a perfect condition. Well, the problem is it's like everything that's kind of a downhill slope from the day you drive off the lot, your car, what your expectation of that car is goes down and down. So the one experience is kind of like that Disney experience. In other words, what can you do to keep that customer experience as high as possible? So every time they come back to the dealership, do you want them to come back because they're mad or unhappy or disappointed, or do you want to create some kind of positive experience? So that's where you see all these dealers, they've invested great deals of money in great showrooms and nice service drives and air conditioned shops and all those things.
Jimmy, most
But
people are spending more on license plate frames than they are their car wash, right? And I get it,
yeah,
it's effective, but not to be too blunt here, but here's the way I view it. From the
yeah,
dealers that I know that have gone
yeah,
ahead and actually put serious quality car washes on their sites,
yeah,
it's only but a matter of time, and it's quickly already becoming the case that what was the old standard is simply not going to work anymore. So this is almost becoming table stakes, almost a
yeah.
need to survive, let alone a value increase on a CSI basis.
Yeah. Well, and exactly, and I think that's the part that we're beginning to discover in the last short period of time, the last few years, especially the last 3 to 4 years, is when I use the term their appetite has changed, it's because dealers now realize that their investment in a car wash is meant to be the kind of investment that is not a headache to them. Okay. In other words, if you spend a reasonable amount of money on not so great of a car wash and you don't really take care of your car wash, you don't keep your equipment clean, you don't keep your tunnel clean. In fact, it may be a car wash tunnel that a lot of dealerships may not wash their own personal car there just because it's not really, it's, it's kind of a conflicting area. In other words, go wash the car, but don't take my car back there kind of thing.
Right. Yeah,
So,
some of them are
so
pretty decrepit.
so what's happened is that's beginning to show up on the service drive. The car comes up on the service drive and it's not really that clean. Or even, the dealerships never see the importance of hitting the car real quick with a vacuum when they come in for service. But what's happened is that customer experience when they come to the dealership, and let's say they bought a car 6 months ago or 9 months ago, and they love the car, but they needed, a tire rotation or they needed some kind of service or they had a warranty recall or whatever it might be. Well, when they come back, at that point, remember that whole process is they love their car when they bought their car, but that customer experience goes down and the dealership's objective needs to kind of reinvigorate, hey, they really need to look forward to come back into a dealership. And when
Jimmy,
they come back, yeah, do what?
let me ask you one question here, just to frame this, because a lot of this, and I think after this we can get into the actual cost bases, but just to frame this for listeners and viewers. How much does it cost that dealer in terms of variable per unit cost? How much is it actually costing them to deliver what is arguably the easiest and most noticeable differentiation when they deliver cars and fixed ops?
Well, so when you look at the capital investment, over whatever period of time, they're going to depreciate that capital investment over a 5 year period of time. And so whatever that is, let's just say they spend $200,000, depreciate that over 5 years. That's going to be their fixed cost. But that's no different than their fixtures, furniture, and equipment facility when they built that dealership. It's a fixed cost from them. Okay. But the other part is obviously what's their monthly maintenance and chemistry and personnel. And so this is a simple number that I use all the time. A conversation is this. Let's say a dealership, whatever he pays for his car wash, he's typically going to have a couple of porters and it's some staff related to moving cars through the car wash, whether it's dedicated staff or whether it's people that are going to have dual roles. But let's just say that cost is a couple of people, and it's going to cost that dealership somewhere between 75 to $100,000 a year to staff a car wash. That's to have 2 or 3 personnel moving customer cars, but he's got that cost already for a service drive, and so they're looking at that service drive is nothing but when the customer comes on the drive and meets a porter, and then he moves the car back to the back. So the process is every dealership has some level of porter staff, but that's a non-revenue producing person. So let's let's get that porter doing everything we can, and you'll see that the manufacturers all have standards, walk around standards, customer greeting standards. There's nothing worse than bringing your car on the service drive and you're not real happy, something's wrong with your car, and you're not real happy, you're busy in a hurry, and you pull up there and you sit there wait because the guy that's on the service desk is on the phone or talking to another customer. So they have these porters that they're meant to greet the customer right away and point them to where the service waiting room is and see what their question is. And if they're looking for a service advisor by name, get them with that person, but mainly just have that customer experience. But on the back end, again, uh, nobody at a dealership really enjoys, they get their car fixed, they go to pick up their car, and they go pay the cashier, and they just point, okay, your car's sitting out there on the drive. No, that process is a little bit more of a personable, if you want that customer experience. Because again, you understand what they're all after at that standpoint is that customer return another time. They're all after that customer experience. How did that customer go? Because when that customer leaves there, he's going to get a survey at some point. And when that survey is in his hands, how did he feel about the dealership? So, from our perspective, the car wash is the perfect tool to make that lasting impression. Because you
So
walk
Jimmy,
out to your dirty car, you're not real happy.
so all this cost around your car wash operation, in my mind, and I think you'll tend to agree, is fixed. So
Yeah,
on a variable cost basis, having a better quality car wash is no more expensive on a per car basis. We're talking about throwing a quarter or 50 cents at every car to have a
yeah.
client who gives you a better survey response. This is
That, that,
basic stuff.
exactly. And that's and again, they're spending thousands of dollars every month to get them to come back for something, to come back for an oil change, to come back for new tires, whatever it is. So they're constantly spending that money. In fact, a dealership, I think the last numbers that I got was somewhere around 1.5 service visits per VIN. So that means the customer only comes back about 1.5 times a year. So you only have less than a couple of times a year typically with the typical customer to make an impression. So that's why they spend so much money on these dealerships to try to help them come back. Because let's say you buy a car and in 3 years you're ready to trade and get a new car. Well, if you didn't have in those 6 or 7 times you went back to the dealership in the first 3 years of ownership, if you didn't have a great experience, if you didn't have a memorable experience, if you didn't have an experience that caused you to want to go back there and buy another car, get your car serviced, there's plenty of places to buy a new car, and there's plenty of new makes and models that comes out all the time. So the manufacturer really, really wants you to make that impression that every visit, whether it's once a year, 3 times a year, whatever it is, that they make a lasting impression, that that customer wants to come back and buy that particular make and model. If
Jimmy,
it's
it's
a
almost
Ford,
it's almost frustrating to me because they're already doing all the work. You're
yeah,
already making the fixed investment. You're already paying the porters. You already
yeah,
have the infrastructure. You're just doing it poorly.
yeah. Yeah,
When
correct. And that's our goal is all we're trying to do is use the car wash to elevate the experience. And I realize that car dealers are not necessarily car wash people. So often they view the car wash as more of a negative have to than an opportunity to do something to really stand out for the customer,
and
you know.
I'm not here to tell you that a car wash is going to supplant in terms of magnitude of impact your best salesman. That is
Yeah,
not going to
no,
happen, granted,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah,
But you're already doing it. If we're talking about 2, 3, 4% on your CSI score, this is literally the cheapest return
yeah.
you can get.
Yeah,
It's not,
absolutely.
uh, so, in terms of let's get into the sort of where the meat of this lies. The current solutions, and we've all seen them, and anybody who's listening, I'm sure, has seen how bad the average dealership car wash is in the country.
Yeah,
Terrible.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, it,
absolutely.
it barely runs, and if it runs, it pretty much always leaves the car dirtier or basically hoses it off at best.
Well,
Uh,
it's trying to make something average, like every car is exactly the same. If you build a standard car wash that washes every car exactly the same, you're going to get some cars good output, some cars not so good output. But it gets progressively worse, not necessarily progressively better.
Agreed, absolutely, and I think that's a really good point. So let's talk. I'm a three dealership owner,
Yeah.
and I am just no matter what, I am just sick of it. I don't care. My washes are breaking all the time, and it's time to replace the equipment. And I'm
Yeah.
thinking I'm going to go with touchless in-bay automatics, whatever's the easiest, whatever's the cheapest. What is the cost comparison in what Sonny's is offering versus that of a run-of-the-mill standard procedure replacement car wash for dealerships as it currently stands?
So I'll answer that two ways. I would say that if we're looking at the low end, and meaning that when Sonny's began to focus on the auto dealer market, because we're the conveyorized car wash manufacturer, I really went after this thinking, okay, I'll just pursue the cream of the crop. In other words, I'll look at the top dealers that want to put a top level car wash. And there are some really great dealers out there. And we put some really nice conveyorized car washes in dealerships. Um, and so from that perspective, I'm like, okay, I'll just go after that upper percentile of the dealerships out there. Let's just say the top 10% of the market I'm going to focus on. But as a company, our decision was at Sonny's corporately, our CEO basically said, look, if we're going to go after that market, I want to go after the market entirely. I don't want to limit ourselves to the premium car wash owner. So to answer your question and come back there is that an entry level car wash at a dealership is going to cost somewhere below typically $150,000 and below. That's an entry level. That's going to be a rollover, a very basic drive through with maybe three blowers, very basic things. Maybe not a lot of water. Probably won't have a water softener, probably just have, so the minimum is just to get a car wet, kind of wash it off, quick wash process, 1 to 3 minutes, whatever it might be. That's going to be the entry level. And so when we look at that and Sonny's on an average, if I go apples to apples, our your investment with us, let's just say it's going to be 25 to 30% more on the equipment, but it's going to level itself out over the period of that 5 year investment, meaning that you may spend a little bit more money with us up front, but over the 5 year life of that equipment, because of our preventive maintenance programs, because of our chemistry programs, and because of our support, you're going to find that that is negligible in the course of a 5 year window. When you look at the 5 year depreciation period of any kind of capital investment, what your customer experience has been. So on the low end, we may be a little higher. On the
Jimmy,
on,
just to reiterate for the listeners, we're talking about
yeah,
$40,000.
yeah,
We're
that's
talking about
correct.
no money. This is a joke of a I mean, like in the grand scheme of things,
In terms of the big investment, that's correct. So when we're talking about looking at somebody spending 110, $120,000, it's a very basic entry level. So the question that I ask all the time is sometimes it's better not to offer a car wash at all than to offer a car wash that's not going to really get cars clean.
I would agree
Because
with that.
now you draw customer attention to the fact that, well, my car's not real clean. So what happens when you begin to kind of step to the next level of investment? Let's say a premium drive-through car wash that's going to now have enough not only set up to get a car cleaner, but it's also going to get a car drier. Because again, if you run a car through the car wash and it's kind of dripping wet and pull it back to the service drive, that almost draws more attention to the fact that, yeah, they washed my car, but they didn't do a really great job. So that's where we begin to help dealers see that a little bit more investment on a car wash that's going to have a little bit more of a premium dryer configuration. It's going to have investment in maybe a water softener and spot-free water. That investment is going to pay dividends because number one is the cars are going to come out cleaner, but they're going to be able to deliver it to the service drive in a way that the customer notices it's cleaner.
So Jimmy,
And
let me
that's,
ask you this. If I'm a real genius in terms of seeing that this is literally the cheapest return on incremental customer
yeah,
retention that you could possibly get, and I say, Jimmy, I don't care about $40,000. What
yeah.
is it going to cost me for the primo package that you would recommend at a high volume dealership?
So I'm gonna answer that in two ways. We have two choices. You're either gonna do a drive-through or a conveyor. And usually in most dealerships, that's not so much limited by their budget as it is their facility.
Yeah.
So depending on what they've got to work with. So if we're looking at a facility that is going to require a great deal of, let's say it's a renovation of an existing facility, they've had a rollover in there and it's a 50-foot tunnel that's 16 feet wide. We can put a conveyorized car wash in there, but it's probably going to be a belt conveyor, or it's definitely going to be a bigger investment in terms of concrete. So in that situation, that dealer may be more apt to put a premium drive-through car wash in that situation because we can take that car wash and we can convert that car wash. And I'm going to say the number that we see that most dealers are spending in a premium drive-through car wash, let's just say 200 to $250,000 is the window that we see is average in that category. We can certainly do less expensive drive-throughs, but what we find is that when they've recognized that what they've had for the last 10 or 15 years has been kind of average at best, and now they're fixing to make an investment in getting clean cars, they don't really struggle with that dollar amount because now their investment is now we want to invest in a car wash that's really going to clean cars, going to dry cars. More importantly, going to enhance their customer experience. And that's what we're feeling across the board. Every dealership that makes the investment, yeah, it's a little bit of a struggle to take and spend substantially more money than they did or they thought it was going to cost them. Because again, they don't have any revenue they're charging for it. But once they deliver on that car wash and their customer experience and their customers start to notice it, or more importantly, if their CSI scores creep up and the car wash improves that customer delivery experience, it's a whole different animal. So,
This
so
seems like arithmetically one of the most ridiculous propositions I know. If we're talking about spending an incremental $100,000 for a 5% increase in your CSI, and there's a
possibly so. That's right.
question.
Eh, well, how about this? How about this? Here's a number that and dealers latch onto because sometimes CSI is a variable that has lots of parts, a lot of moving parts that affect it. But here's the thing: customer retention rate for service, 100% controlled by the service department, not by the manufacturer, not by anybody else. Customer retention rates. So if I want to increase my service visits per VIN, in other words, I want to raise it from 1.5 to 1.7, 0.2%. In other words, I just want to increase my average service visits per VIN up. What am I going to do? I'm going to do it in such a way that causes people to come back for the next service, their next oil change, their next tire replacement, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter. 20 years ago, this is really odd to think today. 20 and 25 years ago, most dealerships kind of ran from oil changes. They ran from express services. They only did the wheel services that they had to do. If there was something wrong with the tire, send it to Firestone. Now it's their biggest investment, their express service, every dealership. You know why? Because 60% of their traffic is express service. So if you come and get a simple oil change, and that's all you're there for, or a tire rotation, or a new set of tires, none of those things were welcome services 25 years ago. Today, they're standards. One is the customer, the manufacturer, the cars are built better. So if the cars are built better, they're not breaking down as much. So 20, 25 years ago, dealerships were pretty busy with all the work they could do just repairing cars because they weren't made as well 20, 25 years ago. Today, technology is pretty incredible. There's lots going on in terms of service of cars, but maintenance is really where a dealership's investment. And again, how are you going to get people back for maintenance when you can go anywhere for maintenance unless you've had a good experience when you came to the dealership? And if the car wash can contribute to that, then they're going to come back for that.
How long? So let's get to brass tacks here in terms of any
Yes.
listeners that are listening to this and saying to themselves, I don't understand how this is even a conversation because of how obvious it is, which I
Yeah.
truthfully and in all earnesty, I don't. The amount of capital spend is so de minimis to the impact as your overall reputation, clientele, service retention. It's a joke. It's a
Yeah.
no-brainer. How long does it take? So let's say somebody calls you and says, Jimmy, I saw your podcast with Harry Caruso. You are
Yeah.
awesome. Let's go. I have 6 dealers.
So we can deliver a car wash in 30 days, but realistically, it's going to take 60 days to convert a car wash because you're going to have to pull out the equipment that you've got in, and it's going to take a typical, and we're talking drive-through car wash. We're not talking about conveyorized car wash. We'll talk about that conversation a little bit more if somebody really wants to take it to the next level, what their options are. But I'm talking about a really standard drive-through, and at Sonny's we have three packages, if you will, that are kind of the good, better, best, if you will, in terms of estimate. They will all clean a car. They'll all do a good job washing a car. We wanted to make sure that even if our baseline car wash, you can still get a clean car. The difference is how many dryers do you want? How dry do you want your cars to be? There's not a lot of variance there. We get to our top level, like a 7 touch. It's got high pressures because now it's got chemical application to clean the wheels a little better. Everybody wants clean wheels, those kind of things. So what I'm getting at is any one of those packages I can deliver in 30 days. It's going to take our crews about 2 weeks to install. Then you've got time for the plumbers, electric, all the trades are going to have to come in and do their work. So I would tell most people if you give me the green light, let's make this happen in 60 days. We're going to order the equipment, deliver it, have it in 30 days. We're going to schedule our crews to pull your old car wash equipment out. If you want to renovate your tunnel and put some wallboard up or anything, that's the time to do that in that process, maybe even sooner than the equipment gets there. But they can be back and washing cars, within 30 to 60 days after pulling the old car wash out. So they may wash their old car wash right to the last minute and then we pull it out and put equipment in. But more often than not, we'll see them because again, it's usually a tired, worn out tunnel, needs a little bit of work. Pull the old car wash out right away. Then we can work with them on working with a subcontractor or an architect, or it's just work we can do and put up all board depending on what needs to be done. But that car wash at the very least needs to be pressure washed and cleaned. The whole tunnel needs to be cleaned out. Because again, I say it all the time, we can only wash your car as clean as you're going to keep your tunnel. So if you've got a clean and neat tunnel and everything, is, taken care of from that standpoint, the equipment does a much better job in a clean environment. That's not really done, not too much of a stretch.
No,
So
it
yeah,
certainly is not. I
so
think
I think 30 to 60 days is the window. Now
yeah.
then, if we go to a conveyorized car wash, that's a whole different level, and we can talk about that as it goes. But I want dealers to understand that if they want to step into a premium car wash, like I have a dealership right now that emailed me last night, he's ready to go. I put his first car wash in 2012. We're exchanging drawings, quotes, and stuff like that, and working with our teams out here to make sure get everything dialed in. But I know what's going to happen with him. He's going to say go, and he's going to know how fast. So our job is get a schedule set, but realistically, I'm going to ask him to plan for, that 45 to 60 days is his window. So if he wants to move fast, then it's a matter of getting the equipment here. But let's go ahead and shut your tunnel down now and get it completely ready so that when the equipment gets there, all we got to do is install it, get it dialed in, and start washing cars.
Jimmy, let's focus a little on the other aspect of this, which is you mentioned this, we all know this, and any listener also knows this. The literal last thing I want to waste time on as a dealer owner, especially a multi-dealership owner,
Yeah,
is thinking about the car wash. So
yeah.
my big question in that vein is upgrading to a premium car wash setup, is that going to be more of a headache, more moving parts, more breaking parts, harder for my employees? What are the give me the negative ramifications?
Well, so again, I'll go back to historically. Dealerships generally had these base opinions on the car wash. Was it worth it? Was too much trouble. Some didn't want to mess with it. Well, that changed over customer expectations changed and manufacturer expectations changed. In other words, it became important. It's important to a customer. They likely won't come back to your dealership if they come and expect a car wash. And the last dealership they went to washed their car, they're likely to say, you know what? I'm not coming back there. Or what's even worse is if you have a car, but you don't have a process set up, and if you have a car wash, but you don't have a process set up in place, and you're only getting about half your customer cars. So now you're just rolling the dice with every customer that's going to make a difference in your survey and your scores. So what I find is that what's in that process of making that decision as a dealer, number one is it really just comes down to how important is customer retention. If customer retention is important and his customer being at a premier level, an elite level as a dealership, car washes is going to be a part of what he offers. If he's not looking for an elite status, if he's just looking to sell cars and that's how he's going to make his money, he may or may not have a car wash. But in most cases, dealers that are looking for a premium relationship with the manufacturer and a premium experience for the customer, they're going to put a car wash in. They may
I,
not know what's the best car wash. That's our job, is to help them see what the difference is.
but is it more complicated? Again, I don't want an incremental headache here.
Well, yeah. So, yeah, and I didn't really answer your question well there. So, here's what I would tell you: the less you invest in your car wash, the more trouble it is to take care of.
That's what I'm trying to. So goodness knows, I've always found, and for listeners out there, I founded Car Wash Advisory now 6.5 years ago, which has been built up to the premium and leading sell side investment bank in the car wash space. I didn't come from car washes though, and Jimmy, to be quite frank and level set, and I think a lot of the dealer owners that are listening to this will agree. I personally think all of the bells and whistles are kind of absurd when it comes to
Yeah,
car washes.
yeah,
Look, most people don't know if you're putting ceramic on it. I didn't know, right, that high press would do as much as it does. I didn't know that you couldn't operate without a top. I didn't care. It was
yeah,
clean or it wasn't. But
yeah,
now it needs to meet that minimum threshold, which is a lot higher,
yeah.
and better washes don't break as much.
Yeah, so that's exactly right. And so again, when you're trying to make a entry level car wash do everything that, and you have a high expectation of your output, but you make a low level investment, meaning that I'm gonna spend the least amount of money, you're gonna create a great deal of customer frustration from the vendor, from the car wash vendor to the owner because it's constantly breaking down or he's getting negative surveys or my car wasn't clean and all that. So that's really where we take them is if you want to trust us to show you how to deliver a clean, shiny, dry car that is going to make a difference and your customer is going to take notice. Number one is you're going to have to make the investment to do that.
How about in terms of preventative maintenance? Again, I don't want to be
Yeah,
insensitive, and I'm sure you can empathize with this. And God, goodness knows I've made mistakes on my end in learning and growing as an entrepreneur, in that you must fully understand what does truly move the needle for you. And if you're suited as a dealership to sell cars, you better be
yeah,
focused on selling cars and not spending time thinking about, not spending on, but thinking about the wash. Does
that's right.
Sunny's offer anything that takes or alleviates my pressure from maintenance, from
Yeah. Yeah, so we're fortunate in Sunny's we have over 500 people that drive in a Sunny's truck across the United States, coast to coast. We have Sunny's Car Wash service organizations across the country. So we have service techs, skilled service techs in every market that we have a structure set up for preventive maintenance programs for conveyorized tunnels, for drive-through tunnels, for in-bay automatics. So yeah, that's an essential component. In fact, one of the kind of exciting things I felt like was so important because again, dealerships often and really fixed operations departments often are worried about their cost. Okay. And they look at that cost of preventive maintenance. Well, let me just kind of give you a number. let's just say that preventive maintenance costs you $500 a month. So you spend $6,000 a year to minimize downtime, to make sure that your cars are clean, everything's going well, just in preventive maintenance, okay? As opposed to, let's say we don't do it and we only call when it breaks down. Well, you realize what that cost you, that one day your car wash is broken down and you can't wash any cars. So then all of a sudden that could cost you 10 times what that preventive maintenance cost you. So as a rule of thumb, where we come in is we come in and understand that that needs to be an essential part. So one of the things we do at S1E is, because we have the people, we build in for the first 90 days preventive maintenance free of charge. We want to offer service for 3 months so that, number one, you get to experience and make sure our guys are, know what they're doing. But we want to eliminate that headache. You bought a brand new car wash, you want to be able to talk to people up front. You don't want to worry about whether it's being taken care of. You don't want to worry about whether it's adjusted
No,
right. That really needs to be our problem. And so when we are able to get somebody to allow us to come and do preventive maintenance for the first 90 days, we're trying to take the headache off of the service director, off of the fixed ops director, certainly the dealer, so that it is a seamless experience. In other words, if you go to S1E's website, it says make car washing easy. Well, in the car wash world, that has one meaning, meaning that, okay, everybody in the car wash world knows how to wash a car and they have all their expectations and they have their preferences and all that. But that's S1E's built that whole theme around. We've got our warehouses, our distribution centers would make car washing easy for car washers. But when I use the term make car washing easy for auto dealers, that's a whole different animal, because for most auto dealers, car washing is not easy. It is a pain point. It is an area of their dealership they have to do. If they didn't really have to, they'd rather not mess with it, but they have to. So it becomes a pain point if it becomes a have to and it really doesn't clean a car well, or it doesn't hold up well, or if it breaks down. And believe you me, we get those calls. So even if we have preventive maintenance and we get those service calls, and those guys are not happy, but the most important thing is how quickly can I have somebody there? And so we realize that car washes are going to break down, but if we have a preventive maintenance program that minimizes those breakdowns so that you virtually may not even know certain things are broken because our PM. We do the same thing on our chemistry. We kind of add to that. S1E's, we do free chemistry for the first 3 months when you buy a car wash. Why? Because we want you to get a clean car. But the other part is our chemistry reps have kind of a white glove service. So once a month, we have a chemistry rep that goes in there and he's making sure, just like in our bigger retail tunnels, everything is set up right. The chemistry is dialed in right, is getting clean. And so that we have, between our preventive maintenance agreement and our chemistry agreement, we have two different people in there every month looking at that car wash from a different perspective, from a throughput standpoint, from an operational standpoint. Again, if we can make it to where it's seamless and least amount of headache to the dealer, and look, it's not an easy business, and that's the best way I put it. Make car washing easy is a statement that we're trying to make it for people that are in the business of servicing and selling cars.
yeah.
It's
So,
not easy though. We have to work very hard to make sure that it's not difficult for them.
Jimmy,
So
I couldn't agree more. And I know you have the same sentiment as I do here. So I believe in doing what you do as
yeah,
best as possible. You
yeah,
cannot be all things to everyone. That is
yeah,
the only way to be sure to fail or produce mediocre results, no matter what you're doing.
yeah,
And so, sort of, we have a company here that has spent decades, nearly a century at this point, learning this art, who's offering to give you that so you can focus on your core competency for a
yeah,
marginal and arguably de minimis cost to you. Or you can just keep the ball and chain on and deliver slightly clean, dirty cars while your competitors take your lunch. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, that's really where we're headed. So when you take it from and by no means is this meant to be so much as a shameless promo as it is the fact that we look around and when we have the thousands of car washes that wash the millions of cars every day out there, And our job is to keep those car washes operating and cleaning cars. And as new sites are built, we want to do that. But as we looked at the 16,800 car dealers, I think now it's grown up to 18,000 car dealers franchises out there today. Every dealership washes cars. And so from our perspective, okay, if they're going to wash cars, we want to be their car wash company. So the way that Sonny's has approached it is okay, we're going to approach it by putting the state-of-the-art equipment. We're going to put the industry leading equipment. I think most people know that Sonny's kind of leads in those categories in the release of new technology, but also we're going to be able to provide the expertise of not only the installation, that's a given. We got to be able to install what we sell, but to be able to service it, support it, and provide the chemistry is really an essential thing. Again, I'm going to go back to this other reference. I had this dealer reach out to me, and his only concern with the car wash that he had over the last 10 or 12 years was that a lot of deterioration going on inside that tunnel. The equipment looks deteriorated and rotted and all that. He's been generally happy with the equipment that he bought, but he's not happy of the condition. He's just seen that deterioration. And in his mind, he's thinking that, well, it's just we have crappy water up here and that's just have to live with that. Well, they do have bad water up there, but we can do something about it. We own a water company. Because our water company, we're going to put the right kind of water equipment. Particularly, we may have to put a water softener in. You know, it's interesting in dealerships out there in 15 years, 10, 15 years before I came to work for Sonny's, never was a water softener a conversation in any piece of equipment. It didn't matter. It just never was a part of the conversation.
And
So,
and
so
Jimmy,
that
in
that
fairness, not to interrupt, but in fairness, uh, should a dealership owner need to know what a water softener is? They should if they're not working with a company that truly provides the best in class and you can handle it. So it's not
Well, this
absurd.
that's my point. He just thinks it's bad water. I just said to him, no problem. We'll do water test. We will test your hardness levels and let's put a water softener in there to deal with your hardness. And guess what? He'll end up putting out cleaner cars because his chemistry will do a lot better. That's the byproduct. The long-term benefit is his investment is going to hold up better. The equipment's going to operate better. It's going to look better. It's not going to deteriorate. So those are things that we again, trying to educate dealers that, okay, we're in this for the long term, but we realize that we have one objective. We want that car wash to be an asset to them and their customers. We want
I
it to be
want,
noticed.
Jimmy, I want, just to be clear, because you mentioned shameless plug as a half tongue-in-cheek comment.
Yeah,
For all the listeners and viewers, I have zero interest in Sonny's, financial or
yeah,
otherwise, although I do
yeah,
love them
yeah.
as people, and your team and what you've built is incredibly impressive. I have a vested interest in that. I'd like more multi-site dealerships to do this so that their dealerships are worth more when it comes time to sell, which is our side of the business.
Well, so let me give you kind of a recent example. Again, another dealership group that I've worked with for a long time, and I put their first car wash in 2012 at their Hyundai dealership. And then I think the next year I put in their Kia dealership. And they've got Kia, Hyundai, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, Chevrolet. They've got all the different franchises, 10 different locations, very typical dealership group. And again, for the first 7, 8 years, we were staying under a real low threshold. In other words, the budget, whatever the cost was with the cheapest competitor, they just wanted to pay a little bit more for mine because they knew what I was selling was a little bit better car wash, but they didn't want to get too far from the cheapest. In other words, it was probably a psychological game. I just want a little bit better one, but I don't want to spend a lot more money to get a little bit better one. So that was the rationale. Okay. So what happened is with Sonny's when we began to look at it, and again, I took a different approach when I came to work for Sonny's and began to see that okay, here are unique things that we offer that that's not just more expensive, but more beneficial to the dealer. In other words, everything that we offer that costs more has a benefit to them and to their customer. So now we have that same dealership group that is spending more than twice as much. And I'm talking 250, $300,000 per tunnel. Okay. And the difference is their CSI score is escalating
How high?
immediately. Well, I'll without knowing all their numbers, but I'll give you this one particular Hyundai dealership, middle of the pack. There's roughly 800 Hyundai dealerships across the country. They fell in nationally right in the middle of that, probably fell right in the middle of their region to rose up to number 15 in the country within 90 to 120 days of the investment they made in the dealership, the service drive, the car wash, all part of it. And the fixed ops guy will tell me their customers, his exact words are, he said, the cars stand up better when they come on the service drive. That customer notices it's clean. In fact, will comment that, hey, thanks for cleaning my car. Where in the past, they may have washed their car because that kind of met the expectation. But when you do only what people expect, they don't necessarily have a lot of gratitude. They're just glad you did what you expected them to. But when you exceed their expectations, they're thankful. And so that customer tends to return that and really fill out their survey and say, man, I had a great experience and my car was really clean this time. And here's what we're doing. We're giving them the merchandising tools now with our dealership car washes so that their service advisors can talk about their car wash, that their customers notice that they wash car. You make that kind of investment, make customers aware of what you're doing to make sure that they're happy. Be sure and tell them, hey, we're cleaning your car. In fact, we're back. Each one of these dealerships is also about a vacuum system, a central vacuum system. So now, not every car is just run through the rollover car wash and brought back to the driveway a little dripping, and hopefully it's cleaner than it was, as opposed to now it's run through our premium drive-through car wash. It's a clean car. It's been wiped down with the microfiber cloth real quick while they went back there and quickly vacuumed it. It took an extra 5 minutes. But again, to go from the middle of the pack in the country, number 3 or 400 in the nation, to number 15 in the nation, if you just use that as one example of one dealership in a Hyundai franchise. So it's really possible with any dealership out there to raise its process. And look, they're not just out going buying the car washes. I'm already having to spend millions of dollars on a new service facility, on a new showroom, on a new service drive, meaning all the images, whatever a customer feels and touches, the manufacturer has a very set of standards. So if I'm having to spend all that money, why wouldn't I invest in the one thing that when it's all said and done, they're not going to take your nice leather chairs home. They're not going to take your big 75-inch big screen TVs home. They're going to take the car that you serviced home. And is that car clean? If that car is clean, that's taking a little bit of the dealership home with them. They're going to remember that dealership. They're not going to go back because you have nice, comfortable chairs and couches or nice coffee. Although that's important, they want
No,
while they're there that to be good.
but Jimmy, everybody has that. So there's very
Yeah,
few places that you can really stand to differentiate yourself. And the
that's
obvious
right.
one, which there is no denying, is your team and your sales force and your actual, personnel. That's it. This is one of those few last opportunities as a dealership owner
Yeah.
to go above and beyond, and it doesn't cost anything of significance. Do it. Just do it, right?
Yeah, our vision is that we think car washing is kind of rounding out the long-term 20-year window of dealerships doing what they need to do to deal with the express customer, which their customers change. Cars are made better, service visits per VIN are going down. We used to get your oil changed every 3,000 miles, so at least they got 3 to 4 service visits a year. Now their oil changes are 9 to 10,000 miles. And so because their computer, onboard directive, and when it says on the screen, change your oil, and they may have driven 9,000 miles. Well, if they only drive 15,000 miles a year, there's your 1.5 visits per VIN, right? That customer only comes in when the little light comes on and says they have to go in and get the oil change. That's if they're one of the 30% of customers who go back to the dealership to get that done. You got to remember that after 3 years, they lose 70% of their customers because they no longer have any kind of hook in them, because at least warranty kind of has them an obligation to go to the dealership. There's nothing more disheartening to a service manager to have invested millions of dollars in lube bays, alignment machines, nice shops, express services. Ford's made a real big push, and many of the dealer brands have. That Ford has like Ford Quick Lane, and every franchise has their own version of an express lane. So they invest all that money. There's nothing more disheartening than that customer comes back in that 3 year window and they come back for warranty and they're going to take care of that warranty. But where do you get your oil change? Oh, there's an oil change place over by my house. Oh, I get it done over. In other words, they don't see any reason to come back for those necessary services. They only come back for the factory required services. So again, we think that if they could make that investment in the car wash, they all want a clean car. And they're more likely paying somebody to wash their car if they drive a fairly new car. So why not, when you do need your car serviced, go out of your way to go back to the dealership because man, they really do a good job cleaning my car. That's just
J-
a little perk. So
Jimmy, I
we
think,
think,
well, go ahead.
no, I'm saying we think that what we're doing to round up what I was saying is we are rounding up what we think is filling in that one gap. Dealerships have added these facilities, they've added these services. It becomes 60% of their traffic. The one thing that we think that they're missing is a car wash in most facilities that's memorable enough to make people want to come back. So that's what we're changing. We're trying to raise their expectations so they deliver a better car wash to the
This
customer.
could be one of the most unilateral internal arguments I've ever had. I don't
Yeah.
think I can even postulate a possible rebuttal to this making sense for a multi-site dealership or a single site dealership. And pretty simple. So, Jimmy, we're running tight on time here, and I can't thank the listeners enough. But can you be sure to share with everybody as to how they can find you, how they can contact you, and any sort of thoughts you want to leave them with?
Yeah, so that's one of the exciting things about Sunny's is, you know, everything you'll see about us is sunnysdirect.com. So if you go to www.sunnysdirect.com, you can see all kinds of information. We even have a landing page for auto dealers when they select equipment, so they can click on here and it'll take them straight to a page for auto dealers. And so the best way to reach us is go into that landing page. Now for me, somebody wants to reach out to me just like anybody else, it's jimmy.williams@sunnysdirect.com. But if they go to sunnysdirect.com, the website, and request anything about an auto dealer, it's going to get directed to me. And then I'll engage one of our 9 region teams because we've got sales reps and region managers all across the country that will engage in that process.
Jimmy, I cannot thank you enough for joining us today. I think that this is one of the more exciting and easy to wrap your head around needle movers for dealerships in today's world. So I can't thank you enough for joining us. And for all the listeners out there, can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. So we look forward to our next episode. And thank you so much again, Jimmy.
Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it, bud. Have a good day. Bye bye.